Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. Today is April 7th. It is 10 a.m. and we're here in docket number 2022-2-E. Please join me in a brief moment of silence before we begin. Thank you. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioner J. Williams, Commissioner Caston, Commissioner C. Williams, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Powers, and Commissioner Belzer. Joining us virtually, we have Commissioner Urban. Attorney Stark, if you would, please read the docket.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, as you noted, we are here for the proceeding in docket number 2022-2-E, which concerns the annual review of Dominion Energy's base rates for fuel cost. The proceeding and the hearing has been scheduled for Thursday, April the 7th at 10 a.m. Mr. Chairman, I believe the docket to be complete and in order. However, I would note, Mr. Chairman, that CMC Steel, South Carolina, has requested to be excused from this hearing, and that request was approved by Hearing Officer Directive 2022-29H yesterday, sir.
Thank you. All right, let's take appearances from the parties. The applicant, Dominion Energy South Carolina Incorporated.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. My name is Chad Burgess. I'm in-house counsel for Dominion Energy, and with me today is Matthew Gissendanner. He's also in-house counsel for the company. We also have our outside counsel present with us, Michael Anselmo and Jason Richardson, both of the law firm of McGuire Woods. It is a pleasure to appear before you this morning, and we appreciate the opportunity to present the company's case today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, gentlemen. Good to see you all in person. All right, we're going to move on to the interveners. South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. This is Kate Mixon here on behalf of South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and the Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. And with me here today is my co-counsel, Emma Clancy.
Attorney Mixon, Attorney Clancy, good to see you all this morning.
Good to see you too.
CMC Steel has, counsel for CMC Steel has been excused. South Carolina Energy Users Committee.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Scott Elliott. I'm here on behalf of the energy users.
Good to see you again, Mr. Elliott, Attorney Elliott. The South Carolina Department of Consumer Affairs is not appearing in this matter. And so last but certainly not least is the Office of Regulatory Staff.
Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair Belzer, members of the Commission, good morning. It's great to be here with you in person today. We appreciate the opportunity to appear before you. My name is Nicole Hare on behalf of the Office of Regulatory Staff, and I'm here with my co-counsel, Alex Knowles. Thank you.
Good to see you, Attorney Hare and Attorney Knowles. All right, counsel. Mr. Ham walked in. Is there anything we need to discuss before we begin? All right, let's have the first panel.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The company calls to the stand George Lippard and Henry Jean Delk as our first panel.
Thank you, sir.
Gentlemen, if you would raise your right hands, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, you ready for us to proceed?
Yes, sir. Please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Lippert, if you could please state your full name for the record.
Yes, sir. My name is George A. Lippert III.
And whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Dominion Energy, South Carolina, as the Site Vice President of the VC Summer Nuclear Station.
And did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 10 pages of direct testimony that was pre-filed with the Commission on February 7th, 2022?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did your pre-filed direct testimony include any exhibits?
It did not.
Do you have any changes or addition to your direct testimony?
I do not.
If I asked you all of the questions contained in your pre-filed direct testimony here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, sir, they would.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I move the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Lippert be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Lippert will be read into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Lippert, have you prepared a summary of your pre-filed direct testimony in these proceedings?
Yes, sir, I have.
Will you please present this summary to the Commission at this time?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Commissioners. The purpose of my direct testimony is to review with the Commission the operating performance of the VC Summer Nuclear Station during the review period of January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2021. The company's primary objective is to strive for excellence in all phases of the facility's operation that is reflected in the outstanding service record of VC Summer. The station's key focus areas of safety, reliability, outage and work management, workforce development, and organizational effectiveness constitute the company's core business plan elements. These objectives also focus on maintaining a competitive production cost for the generation of electricity using nuclear fuel. VC Summer performed well during the review period. DESC continuously meets or exceeds all NRC requirements and INPO standards. The company is pleased to report that INPO rated VC Summer's overall performance as exemplary, which is the highest achievable rating that a plant can receive. The NRC is responsible for the licensing and oversight of the civilian use of nuclear materials in the United States. During the review period, the NRC reported that VC Summer operated in a manner that preserved public health and safety and fully met all cornerstone objectives. Consistent with the provisions of South Carolina law, VC Summer's net capacity factor, based on reasonable, excludable nuclear system reductions during the review period, was 102.16%, and the gross generation output was 7,281,012 megawatt hours. As for plant outages, VC Summer experienced one mid-cycle unplanned maintenance outage during the review period. On May the 12th, 2021 at 6:37 p.m., the company opened the main generator breaker and brought the plant offline to safely repair a valve actuator on its safety-related, non-radioactive Loop B main feedwater isolation valve. DESC had experienced a similar repair to its Loop A main feedwater isolation valve in September of 2020 and had been monitoring the Loop B main feedwater isolation valve under the plant's trending program. In May 2021, the air leak reached the point where its repair became necessary. Due to the function of the valve, the company was required to take the plant offline to implement the repairs and perform post-maintenance testing. The valve actuator was repaired and tested, and the outage ended with the closure of the generator breaker on May 15th, 2021 at 3:29 a.m. In light of the company's recent experience with these components, DESC intends to replace them during VC Summer Nuclear Station's next refueling outage. However, since the filing of my pre-filed testimony, the manufacturer has informed DESC that the possibility exists that it may not be able to complete the company's order in time for the 2023 spring refueling outage. We are monitoring this matter closely. During the review period, VC Summer also experienced one planned outage for refueling. This refueling outage began on October 8th, 2021, and the reactor was returned to criticality at 3:43 p.m. on November 13th, 2021. The refueling outage ended with the closure of the generator output breaker at 11:41 a.m. on November 14th, 2021. During this refueling outage, approximately 1/3 of VC Summer's 157 total fuel assemblies were replaced, and scheduled maintenance work that cannot be performed when the plant is in operation was conducted. During this time, over 6,000 tasks, including preventative maintenance, corrective maintenance, plant modifications, and surveillance testing tasks were completed successfully. Moreover, the company met all technical objectives and completed all scheduled maintenance activities during this outage. The outage lasted 36.5 days and was completed with no nuclear safety significant events. As the unit was in the process of returning to full power after the refueling outage, the main generator step-up transformer, or GSU, experienced a significant failure at 5:28 p.m. on November 15th, 2021. This resulted in an automatic turbine trip followed by a manual reactor trip, thereby interrupting the unit's planned return to service. The plant trip response was normal. It's important to note that a GSU is a very large custom-built piece of equipment that is critical to the bulk transmission grid, as it adjusts the electric voltage to a suitable level on each segment of the power transmission from generation to the end user. DESC's investigation of this matter revealed that the fault resulted from a failure of the transformer's center phase, high side, or 230 kilovolt, that's 230,000 volts, bushing. The original equipment manufacturer, Mitsubishi, also conducted an evaluation which confirmed DESC's assessment that the fault had caused damage to such a degree that the GSU could not be repaired. After this incident, work began to partially disassemble the GSU's auxiliary systems to prepare it for removal from its pad-mounted location so that DESC's spare GSU could be put into place. While DESC was partially disassembling the GSU, DESC prepared its spare GSU so that it could be moved into the transformer yard for reinstallation. The spare had served as Summer Station's previous GSU, which had been removed from service in 2009, but had been kept in inventory as a spare and maintained ready for service if needed. Summer Station was offline for approximately 25 days, returning to service on December 10th, 2021, with closing of the main generator breaker at 7:48 p.m. Turning to spent fuel, VC Summer's used fuel storage capability, consists of a spent fuel pool and a dry cask storage facility, which has been designed to accommodate storage of all fuel used for the life of the plant. The company last transferred used fuel from the spent fuel pool to the dry cask storage facility in spring 2019. The next such transfer began in March of this year and was completed on March 25th, 2022. This concludes my summary.
Thank you. And Mr. Delk, if you could state your full name for the record, please.
My name is Henry Eugene Delk Jr., and I go by Gene.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
Dominion Energy, South Carolina. I'm the Director of Power Generation Operations.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 16 pages of direct testimony that was pre-filed with the Commission on February 7th, 2022?
Yes, I did.
Did your direct testimony include any exhibits?
No, it did not.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 16 pages of corrected direct testimony that was pre-filed with the Commission on March 4th, 2022?
Yes, I did.
Did your corrected direct testimony include any exhibits?
No, it did not.
Do you have any changes or additions to your corrected direct testimony today?
I do not.
If I asked you all the questions contained in your pre-filed corrected direct testimony here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I move the pre-filed corrected direct testimony of Mr. Delk be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed corrected direct testimony of Mr. Henry E. Delk Jr. will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Delk, have you prepared a summary of your pre-filed corrected direct testimony?
Yes, I have.
Would you please present it to the commission at this time?
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission. The purpose of my testimony is to review the operating performance of our non-nuclear power generation units from January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2021. The company operates a diverse non-nuclear generation portfolio of approximately 5,000 megawatts fueled by coal, natural gas, fuel oil, as well as hydro, including pumped storage hydro.
Mr. Delk, if you would move the microphone closer to you, sir. Maybe a little bit closer than that.
Is that better?
That is better. If you speak like that, that's perfect.
Would you like for me to start over?
No.
Okay. The company's non-nuclear generation capacity increased in 2021 from the advanced gas path upgrades on 2 combustion turbines at the Jasper station. These upgrades continue this year at Jasper and Columbia Energy Center. DESC undertook a number of significant projects during the review period through ongoing maintenance outages at Jasper Station, McMeekin Station, Urquhart Station, Williams Station, and Columbia Energy Center. The company defines a significant forced outage as lasting more than 7 days for a unit of greater than 100 megawatts capacity. 3 units experienced a significant forced outage during the review period. Watery Unit 2 remains out of service while repairs are being made by replacement of the generator stator. The company is pleased to report that the replacement stator midsection has been installed and is undergoing final testing for a return to service later this spring. The Columbia Energy Center experienced a rapid drop in pH levels in its boiler steam water system on October 12th. The plant was shut down in a controlled manner to protect critical equipment, including the heat recovery steam generators and steam turbine. 2 days later, on October 14th, and unrelated to the issues with steam water chemistry, the plant experienced a failure of one of its circulating water pumps. This prevented boiler water cleanup activities from continuing. The plant placed a rebuilt circulating water pump back into service and continued boiler water chemistry cleanup efforts of flushing and water treatment until November 12th, when units 1 and 3 were returned to service. Once all chemistry parameters were acceptable, Unit 2 returned to service 6 days later on November 18th. Following this event, all water treatment chemical valves were replaced and realigned, and the plant added additional online water chemistry analyzers to immediately detect chemistry excursions in the future. The company has taken steps to address the issues that occurred at Columbia Energy by moving forward and ordering a spare circulating water pump and motor to be stored on site. Urquhart Unit 6 experienced a forced outage that began on December 18th. While in a maintenance outage, the vendor replaced 2 combustion cans on the gas turbine. During replacement of the combustion cans, the vendor failed to remove and reinstall the liner caps from the old cans into the new ones, which caused the failure of the 2 combustion cans when the gas turbine was restarted. The vendor immediately mobilized crews that worked around the clock over the holiday season to repair the unit, which returned to service on January 3rd, 2022. In summary, our non-nuclear power generation fleet has operated reliably and efficiently during the review period. Thank you for your time. This completes the summary of my testimony.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Lippard and Mr. Delk are available from questioning from the parties and the commission.
Cross-examination.
Brief cross, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Lippard, Mr. Delk, good morning. I appreciate you being here and your testimony this morning. Mr. Lippard, I'd like to start with you if I could. you were discussing with Mr. Anselmo in your summary a outage related to the failure of the generator step-up transformer at VC Summer. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And this outage, subject to check, took place approximately 25 days between November and December of 2021. Isn't that right?
That is also correct.
And would I be correct in saying, Mr. Lippard, that the company is still gathering information and preparing reports related to this outage? Is that right?
That is correct. We know the component that failed, but we have not established the root cause pending some forensic analysis, which is still ongoing.
Thank you. As a result, Mr. Lippard, the Office of Regulatory Staff was not able to review this particular outage for its reasonableness during the review for this proceeding, correct?
That is correct.
And would I be correct in saying, Mr. Lippard, that in the past or historically, ORS has been able to review those outages in a subsequent fuel proceeding where the outage either wasn't complete or where a final report had not been generated? Is that right?
That is correct.
And would I be correct in saying, Mr. Lippard, that the company would not object to the Office of Regulatory Staff completing a review of this particular outage in a subsequent fuel proceeding?
Absolutely not. We are in agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Lippard. Mr. Delk, if I could ask you a few questions for a moment. You mentioned during your discussion with Mr. Anselmo a moment ago that Watery 2 experienced an outage beginning subject to check around February 19th of 2020. Is that right?
That's correct.
And that outage remains ongoing?
That's correct.
And so as a result, Mr. Delk, the Office of Regulatory Staff was not able to review this particular outage for its reasonableness during the review for the proceeding we're here for today. Is that right?
I think that's right.
And again, subject to Mr. Lippard's answer a moment ago, the Office of Regulatory Staff has historically been able to review those outages in a subsequent fuel proceeding where the outage either is not complete or where final report is not available. Is that right?
Yes.
And Mr. Lippard, to your knowledge, the company would not object to the Office of Regulatory Staff completing a review of this outage in a subsequent fuel proceeding?
No, we would not.
Thank you. No further questions.
I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I was expecting you to call the roll, and Ms. Hare jumped up. She's younger than I am. She jumped up more quickly than I. So would you indulge me and allow me to ask some questions?
I would, Attorney Elliott, but all that time you spend in the gym, I would expect you to be a little quicker than that.
Well, the fact of the matter is that my trainer killed me this morning in anticipation of this hearing, so.
Understood. Been there. Yes, sir. Please proceed.
Gentlemen, and I'm asking you both this question. Do either of you have any idea the magnitude of the rate case that the company is seeking in this fuel proceeding?
Sir, I'm sure that it is of some magnitude, but I'm not familiar with the exact amount.
Yeah, same.
Very fine. I expected as much. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Lippard, I'm through with you. I think that you're close to retirement. I may not get another chance to cross-examine you. Nobody slipped me any questions to ask while I had you on the stand here this one last time, but best of luck to you. You've done a nice job. I do have a few questions, however, for you, Mr. Delk, if you don't mind. Would you just describe for me what baseload generation is in your view? There's no right or wrong answer. I'm just trying to establish a baseline for baseload.
I guess I would say baseload is the generation that we rely on most of the time. It runs continuously, not always loaded like Mr. Lippard's nuclear plant, but has minimum and maximums that we have to operate within.
Okay, very fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Now, I note on page 3 of your testimony, you've got a table, and the table reflects that in both the summer rating and the winter rating, the combined cycle plants have the highest generation capacity of the non-nuclear plants. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And behind that is the coal fire steam generation. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, if you'll turn to page 5 of your testimony, beginning at line 8, it looks like that the coal fire steam units and the dual fuel steam unit generated about 22% of the electricity in the test year.
Yes, sir.
The combined cycle units, however, generated about twice that, 44.4%.
That's correct.
Thank you. Now, I want to draw your attention just to several of your units, and I have a number of questions for you, and they're basically the same for each unit. First, the Jasper unit. Is that a base load unit?
Yes, sir.
And that's a combined cycle gas-fired unit, correct?
That's correct.
And I think its source of natural gas is from Elba Island.
I believe primarily the gas there comes from through the Elba facility. I'm not certain as to exact source of where that gas originates.
But through Elba is really my question.
Yeah, that's probably a better question for one of the witnesses who procures the gas.
And she'll get it.
That's okay.
Did you testify that Jasper was down for some maintenance?
Yes, sir. We do regular maintenance on our units periodically.
During the test year, was Jasper down because of some constraint on gas availability?
I don't recall Jasper being down during the test year. Subject to check. Occasionally we do run our units on fuel oil as a backup fuel just to test those systems.
Well, and thank you. I guess my question was, was gas constrained, the gas flow constrained at all during the test year to your knowledge?
To my knowledge, I don't believe so.
Thank you. Now, Urquhart. Is Urquhart a base load facility?
I would say it depends on economics. I would probably characterize that unit as more of an intermediate unit because it's sort of on the bubble. It's no different than Cope Station is a dual fuel unit. Depends on gas prices and whether we operate on natural gas or coal there. The same thing at Urquhart is because it has a little different fuel rate. Sometimes it's out of the economic order, so it may not be considered completely base load as we run it continuously. But when we do run it, we tend to run it for several days at a time to cover whatever peak periods we're trying to cover.
Very fine.
Whatever kind of load we're trying to cover during that period of time.
Thank you. But am I correct in saying that it is also a gas powered plant?
Gas powered with fuel oil as a backup.
Right. And for Urquhart, do you get the gas from Sonat at some point at or near Aiken?
I believe so, yes, sir.
Okay.
Once again, better question for another witness.
And I'm with you. I will follow up. But you were being very helpful. To your knowledge, during the test year, were you unable to run Urquhart for some natural gas constraint, unavailability of natural gas?
I really can't answer that question. I'm not sure.
That's fine. Now, the Williams Station, am I correct? That's the Genco station down near Charleston?
That's correct.
All right. And that's a coal-fired plant, correct?
Correct.
And I think the coal source, and I think maybe the coal source for all your coal plants is this Central Appalachian coal?
Primarily.
Okay.
We can burn some Northern App coal and are looking at more of that as we go.
And I was going to ask Mr. Shin this, but I'll ask you, and you sort of answered the question. So he will testify that you've investigated burning some Northern Appalachian coal, and you have ultimately burned some in some of these one or more of your coal units?
That's correct.
Okay. Is Williams Station a base load plant?
Yes, it is.
All right. And how do you get the coal to Williams? By what rail line?
CSX.
Have you had any disruptions in coal deliveries for this plant? Did you during the test year?
Yeah, it's been a challenge to ship coal. I think Mr. Shin's going to speak more to that point.
Okay. The Watery Station, that's in Richland County near Eastover, correct?
That's correct.
And that's a coal-fired plant, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's a baseload plant, correct?
That's correct.
Is the coal transported there by CSX as well?
CSX and Norfolk Southern.
So you can play one off against the other if you have to.
That Mr. Shin does that for
Yes,
us.
sir. To your knowledge, during the test year, did you have any did you have any difficulty obtaining coal shipments during the test year to the Watery Station?
As I mentioned earlier, yeah, it's been a challenge, but we have not been limited in our operations. We've been able to run the units through maintaining inventories to get through the winter season that we're just really finishing up.
All right, sir. Columbia Energy, that was mentioned earlier. Do you know where the gas supply comes for Columbia Energy?
The source would be, once again, Ms. Jackson, best to answer that question.
All right. It's in the Calhoun County area, very near St. Matthews, correct?
Correct.
Were you, did you incur any gas constraints during the test year for Columbia?
Don't recall. Couldn't answer that question, really.
And would you consider the Columbia plant a baseload plant?
Yes, I would.
Okay. And then the last one.
Once again, let me, based upon economics, I mean, base load, but I think dispatch would be based upon coal versus natural gas pricing and availability, of course.
And I get that, but it would be fair to say that by virtue of its capacity and I suppose its burn rate and other factors, it could be operated as a baseload plant,
Yes,
correct?
okay. Correct.
This is very helpful. I'm not going any deeper than what it seems. And then I think last, the Cope plant. Where's the Cope plant?
It's in Orangeburg County, just off the Edisto River towards Bamberg.
All right, sir. And is that your newest coal-fired plant?
Yes.
And again, subject to the qualifications we've discussed for the other plants, would it be considered a baseload plant?
Yes.
And coal transported by CSX and Norfolk Southern?
Just CSX
CSX?
into that facility.
Did you have any coal delivery interruptions for this plant during the test year, to your knowledge?
Just the same challenges I spoke of earlier.
All right. Now, I do want to ask you just a couple of general questions, and we'll be through. It would appear that Dominion continues to operate and rely on these coal-fired plants for baseload generation. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And we're going to learn from Mr. Shin that that Dominion has, over at least the last 3 years, either burned or anticipates burning more coal than in the previous year. Is it your experience that these coal plants are being used to a greater degree in the last 3 years or so?
No, I've been around for a few years in the generation. I don't know that we're relying on them anymore. We certainly, when we purchased Columbia Energy Center, I think in 2018, that presented some additional combined cycle capacity that we rely on, and we dispatch based upon the most economically viable fuel that we can burn it, or that we can procure and burn at the time. So, my position is to keep those units reliable so that when the economic resource commitment folks call upon them to operate, then they're available as needed. Sometimes that means having a coal plant offline in ready reserve. If the gas prices increase, it could be that we turn a combined cycle unit off and burn the coal. So it really just depends.
Perfect. Thank you very much for all your answers. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will try to leap up more quickly the next time.
That's fine. That's fine. Attorney Mixon, any cross-examination?
We do not have any cross-examination for these witnesses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
No problem. Commissioners, questions for the witnesses? Commissioner Caston.
Morning, Mr. Dell. Not ignoring you, but question.
Good morning.
Do all of Dominion's fossil fuel facilities meet or exceed current federal, state emission standards?
Yes, I believe we do.
Is that like a strong belief they do, or I'm pretty sure they do, or?
Well, I'm certain we do.
Okay.
We're going to meet the regulations, whatever they are. We're
Okay. That's really all I had. Thank you very much.
Vice Chair Belzer.
Good morning. Mr. Delk, I think I wanted to talk about the Urquhart 6 forced outage. What is a structural blowout? Or maybe I need to start with what are combustion cans?
Okay, the combustion cans are basically the area of the gas turbine that the fuel flows into, and you have combustion, the ignition of the gas itself to create the hot gases that flow through the turbine itself.
Okay. And then what is a structural blowout?
What we mean by that is the absence of this cover that was not included when the cans were replaced. It actually blew the can itself apart inside of the turbine itself.
Well,
the hot gas path itself.
was the damage limited to just the can, or was there other damage to the turbine?
It was primarily to the can itself, but there were some, the molten metal actually flowed through the hot gas into the hot gas path section. And so the recovery, the repair to that, our vendor came in and they actually performed a full hot gas path replacement of all of those components downstream.
And I think in your testimony you said that GE continues its full root cause analysis. So has this outage, this forced outage, been reviewed? Has ORS had the opportunity to review that one?
Yes, we provided, I believe, a copy of the root cause that GE provided to us. Out of the root cause meeting we had with GE, there were some efforts on their part to go back and complete that root cause to close it out completely, and I think we're waiting on that final report to come in.
Well, at that time, would Urquhart have been considered a base load or more of an intermediate facility?
That time it would have definitely been intermediate because it occurred in December. We had a very mild December, and we actually had coming into that outage. We had a couple of problems with the unit, and we were in a low load situation, so we took advantage of that to take a scheduled maintenance outage to have GE come in and change these cans out.
But that extended the outage, what, approximately 2 weeks?
That's correct.
And it would have been an intermediate unit at that point, still?
Well, we took the outage because it was not needed to serve our load. And that's why I said, because gas prices were higher, we were in a very mild situation, that unit would have been offline likely throughout that entire Christmas period.
Did GE accept responsibility for this accident?
Absolutely, they did.
Are they covering the repairs, or?
Yes, they are.
Okay. By virtue of the fact that this would have been an intermediate or not really needed at that time, is it Dominion's opinion that there were no increased fuel costs as a result of this accident?
I believe so. Just the unit would have likely not been running. We took it off proactively to make some repairs because it wasn't needed at that time.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning to both of you. First, Mr. Lippert, they said you were going to retire.
Commissioner Powers, that's a goal, but certainly not a certainty.
Okay. Well, the fact that you have very light blonde hair like I do doesn't mean you have to quit.
I was noticing that we have a similar hair color. Cost a lot of money to dye this hair white, doesn't it?
It does. It does. And I guess it's the lawyer in me following up on Commissioner Belser's questions. And I guess I'd ask both of you to answer, or maybe one of you can answer. It sounds like you both had situations where was the result of either negligence or equipment failure that was somebody else's responsibility, whether it's Mitsubishi or GE or any other vendor or provider. Is that correct?
Would you like me to speak to the GSU failure, sir?
Yeah,
I would not say that that Mitsubishi was at fault here. Now, again, we know that the evaluation and the root cause of this bushing failure is still pending. So I don't want to conclude that at this time. What I do want to relate to you is that this transformer underwent a service test, which it does every 3 years. Every other outage, this transformer goes through a full service test, which is designed to test for exactly the type of failure that we incurred. We do a lot of testing. We look at oil samples. We look at dissolved gas analysis. We look at the integrity of the fans and the cooling pumps for the transformer. And most notably, we do a test that we call a Doble test that is designed to look for insulation degradation in bushings and transformer windings. We did not see anything that would have hinted that we were going to have a significant failure to this center face high side bushing. Once the transformer was energized, we went back and did thermography. We did more dissolved gas analysis samples. And literally there was nothing there that could have given us any clue that we were going to have a failure of this type. So it is very interesting. We were very anxious to determine what the cause was if we can. I will let you know that the damage to this bushing was very significant. It has been shipped to a lab that specializes in forensic analysis of highly damaged components. So I'm hopeful that it will tell us something. What makes this very disappointing is we had done everything possible to ensure the health of this transformer going forward and still had an issue.
Well, I know you evaluate risk when you repair or even change out equipment and that sort of thing. And you use the word ensure, and I guess what I'm trying to get at some of this, is there any way for the things you've had to deal with that there's some sort of outside recovery from any vendor, or is there some sort of insurance or risk insurance that Dominion will recover funds for?
Yes, sir. We have filed an insurance claim with NEIL, which is the Nuclear Electric Insurance Limited Company, for the loss.
Okay. So will we have the information of how much is recovered before we make a decision, or is that something that's a long-term thing you're dealing with?
I'm sorry, what decision are you referring to?
Well, I mean, as far as our evaluation of this case that we're handling, is that information going to be part of what's submitted to us?
It will be forthcoming between now and the end of the year.
Okay.
I expect to get the root cause analysis sometime before the end of May, but we've already had NEIL officials on site to inspect, and this transformer is beyond repair, and we are in the process as we speak of evaluating the bids for replacement and a replacement spare for the transformer. We want a new transformer to go in as soon as it can be manufactured and delivered to us.
Okay, and these shutdowns that 1 o'clock in the morning, that may be why you're blonde too.
Well, I would say that it was, we had a very successful refueling outage. 36 and a half days is the third shortest outage in the history of the plant. It was very disappointing after coming back online to only be online for about 30 hours before we were back in an outage. These are the type of activities. A transformer replacement outage is something you plan for a year or more. And we basically had to go into high gear at a moment's notice. And I'm very proud of the organization for turning it around in 25 days.
Mr. Dell, you said that GE stepped up and did whatever repairs were necessary at no cost. Will Dominion be able to recover beyond that from insurance or some sort of other, from GE or anyone?
Yes, I would say to the vendor's credit, they stepped absolutely up. This happened on a Saturday morning. Another incident unrelated, I was in touch with the plant about and decided after this incident I needed to drive down. GE had, before I even got down there, an hour and a half later, they had identified the problem, knew exactly what occurred, had gone over to a crate where the old combustion cans had been boxed up and found the cover that was missing. So from their standpoint, yes, they covered the complete cost, working through the Christmas holidays, New Year's holidays, overtime, around the clock, and we haven't seen a bill for that at all. They're totally stepping up. I just don't, as I mentioned to Commissioner Belcher, I don't know that there's much more cost of lost fuel there, because the unit would have likely been offline anyway during that time period.
Okay. Well, thank you both.
Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you, gentlemen. So my first question is for Mr. Dell, and talked a little bit about the Wateree Unit 2 outage, and that's been out of service for more than 2 years at this point. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And you indicate that the replacement is on schedule?
Yes, sir. That unit was actually put on turning gear this week, just a couple of days ago. But for being in a complete plant outage working on the coal handling systems, we could be in startup today. Of course, it's very mild weather outside. We're going to wrap up the Wateree Unit 1 outage and all the coal handling equipment within the next 2 weeks, and we'll go likely into startup on at least one of those units, followed by the second one likely.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. Lippard, the outage at VC Summer, that was an additional approximately 25 days that lasted as a result of the GSU?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that one has been replaced by one that was retired back in 2009, I think you said.
That is correct.
And so it was obviously a wise decision to have that one sitting around for that long.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So do you think it's reasonable to expect that older unit will last until the fall of 2024 when it's planned to be replaced?
Yes, sir. VC Summer came online in the early 80s. I think we went commercial in 1984. But that transformer, the one that's now in place, the spare that went in to replace the Mitsubishi, it was not in service for the entire time from 1984 to 2009. It at one time was a spare. So it really only has about, I want to say 10 to 12 years of service on it. And transformers like these are generally designed to last 30 to 35 years. So again, to your point, we were very, very fortunate and made a very prudent decision to maintain that transformer as an active spare. But while we were removing the faulted transformer, we did a lot of work to ensure its integrity, to ensure that, that we weren't gonna have any problems with it. So we put it through a full battery of tests and analysis to make sure that it was a spare that we could rely on. And we actually added, this transformer did not have an online dissolved gas analyzers, which is one of your best tools for predicting an imminent failure. We actually added one onto it to bring it up to the standard that most generating stations have at this time. So I have a high level of confidence in it, but I'm anxious to get a new unit in for the time period that you referred to.
Okay. So this is obviously a very, very customized piece of equipment. And I guess I was just wondering if there are, I mean, these things cannot be used by other plants, other utility companies. Is there any way to share, if you could have a spare something that could be shared among different utilities? Is that a possibility?
That was a possibility that we explored. To your point, when you say a large custom piece of equipment, we're talking about a transformer that's about 40 feet wide, fully dressed out with cooling fans and coolers, about 40 feet wide, about 25 feet deep, and about 30 feet tall. So this is a large three-phase transformer. The other consideration is that you have to have the right step-up ratio. Our main generator at VC Summer puts out 22 kV. It is stepped up to 230 kV. So you have to have a transformer that would both fit on our pad and be a three-phase unit and have the right step-up ratio. So I will assure you that we combed the country and even outside the country to see if there was a viable alternative. We found one unit that was down in Florida at a utility down there, but our research and intelligence there told us that that was not a viable unit. It was damaged and ready for the scrapyard, so we declined that option. We continue to look, but if there was one out there, we would have found it by now, I'm confident.
Okay. Well, have you learned anything thus far that out of this failure that is lessons for the future, or is it still too early?
We would, you know, we're in the process now of speccing out a new transformer, and we are actually to the point of evaluating the bids. Anytime you have a painful situation like we had back in November, December timeframe, you are you're very diligent in looking for the best quality bushings, the best quality windings, the best diagnostics. So having experienced that pain of having to swap out a GSU that is only 12 years old, we want to get the best unit we can at the best cost we can to ensure the best reliability for the station and our customers that we can.
Okay. So you're not the one to talk to about the fuel for the plant, are you? That's someone else's responsibility, acquiring and.
My colleague, Mr. Brookmeyer, is he's the company's responsible party, and he'll be testifying before you in a little while.
Okay. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Caston? I'm sorry. Commissioner Williams? Or maybe you all can flip a coin for it. Commissioner Caston?
Thank you. Just to follow up, and I left you out, Mr. Lippard. First of all, I kind of like your nice blonde hair, too. Matter of fact, I was thinking of a verse, and I couldn't remember it, so I looked it up, so I get the opportunity to put a verse on the record, I guess. I think it's Proverbs 16:31. Gray hair is a crown of glory. It is gained in a righteous life. Now, I feel a little bit like I'm not sure that's totally true, but some righteous guys in here, I can tell.
Commissioner Caston, I have 4 daughters. I attribute it to that.
Amen. I can agree to that. Actually, I think Commissioner Belser and Commissioner Powers asked you from, I guess, thinking as attorneys relative to the GSU unit. And my first thought was when you were talking about the test and all that were run and that you run frequently or periodically. I was wondering if those were more like forensic after the fact test, or are there sensors, electronics, PLCs or whatever on the devices that constantly monitor or yeah, how do you do those tests?
The tests themselves, when we do what we call a service test, it would be like taking your car into to the dealership to do everything short of tearing the engine down. You know, the first thing when this transformer failed, I reflected back and I said, well, we didn't do anything to open it up and introduce any foreign material or anything like that. So when we do that service test, we look at the health of the pumps, the health of the fans, and very importantly, we look at the health of the protective relaying. So if your transformer fails, you don't want that failure to propagate back to your main generator, because main generators are much harder to procure and install than main transformers. So you're really checking out everything associated with protecting the transformer and isolating a fault to the transformer. But the Doble testing is specifically designed, it injects a reference voltage and allows you to look for a resistance that would be indicative of a degradation in insulation on your windings or bushings. So that's basically what you're looking for. Now, when the unit is in service, I've referred to a term, a dissolved gas analyzer, a couple of times. That is an inline unit that's constantly looking for the presence of a gas like acetylene. Acetylene would tell you that you have some insulating material that is breaking down. So we're looking at that all the time. Then our power delivery folks, they come out monthly and draw oil samples to look and see if the oil samples contain anything that might have been missed by the dissolved gas analyzer. So we have preventive maintenance to look periodically at the quality of the oil, looking for signs of degradation or imminent failure. The Doble testing that we did as part of the service test looks at the transformer in a de-energized state and looks for those same type of failures. We also do what we call thermography. Thermography is someone coming out with a state-of-the-art thermographic camera, and he looks for anything on the transformer that looks abnormal. And that was done in the, I'll say, 12 to 24 hours prior to the failure, and nothing looked abnormal. This transformer looked pristine until it failed.
Okay, that helps, because certainly we didn't, in my previous life, didn't have units like that or that big, but you know, maybe these massive finished water pumps are pumps that if it went out, it could be problematic. So, you know, we would try, I always tried to find who's doing this well.
Right.
So we can mimic it. You know, we did what maybe would be the preventive maintenance, but I was always looking for that predictive maintenance. Like, are there things that you can monitor and measure trends and that stuff? And I didn't know if y'all were doing that or had done that or could do that.
The confounding thing about this is we had just finished doing exactly what you just described and saw nothing.
That's usually where I work too, usually at 3 a.m. when it's minus 15 degrees, the best time that it could happen. But, all right, no more questions. Thank you. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner Williams.
Thank you. Good to see you all in person. Thank you for your testimony. Is it Lippard?
Lippard.
Lippard, okay.
Yes.
Mr. Lippard, I just have one question, and it relates to during the merger hearing, there was a lot of discussion about kind of best practices that SCNG would be able to share with Dominion with regard to the summer operating plant. Are there any of those that you can describe that have, have been a part of, that have changed Dominion's thinking about the processing of a nuclear power plant, or vice versa?
I would say that, as being part of the Dominion nuclear fleet, and we have a 2-unit station in Connecticut, the Millstone Station. We have a 2-unit station in Virginia at North Anna, which is in central Virginia. We have a 2-unit station more toward the eastern side near Newport News called Surrey. So we are, when we were a single unit utility, back prior to the merger, we had to more actively go out and seek operating experience from our industry peers. We had to be more aggressive in doing that. It's part of our cadence now. Leadership at the plant is on a call every day where we report out what's going on at our plant. The other plants report out what's going on at their plants. We also have another level of oversight called Corporate Functional Area Managers, or CFAMs, where you have a level of oversight looking at all the operations departments, all the maintenance departments, all the engineering departments. So that has provided a helpful layer of oversight for us too. Probably the most significant step forward for VC Summer that relates to these proceedings is our last two outages have been a record-setting 30 days and a third shortest in the history of the plant. The most recent outage was 36 and a half days. Commissioner Williams, I think I've testified before you in years where those outages were in excess of 50 days. So through our merger with Dominion, we have gotten much more efficient at doing outages. We were much better at controlling the scope of an outage as we build its schedule. And there are some efficiencies that we have gained in being part of the fleet that have helped us control both the scope, better plan, and better execute our outages. And I think those outages in the 30-day range will be the norm for VC Summer going forward due to our association with the Dominion fleet.
Thank you. Is there anything you can add to that in terms of financial ramifications related to this particular?
I can.
Okay.
You know, the number of bodies at Jenkinsville, South Carolina is somewhat less than it was prior to the merger, and that's because there are some economies of scale with, you know, Mr. Brookmeyer. He's the procurement director for all the Dominion sites. So there's some efficiencies that we gain where we need less people in Jenkinsville because that function is handled at the corporate office in Innsbruck. Emergency planning, licensing, even some engineering functions. We've been able to scale back the number of bodies at VC Summer, which of course translate labor costs, cost per megawatt hour has decreased because we're sharing some of those corporate functions, IT, HR, those type of things that we had to be self-sufficient and staff up. Now are handled, at least in part, at the corporate level.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Delk, there was an interesting conversation that Mr. Elliott had with you regarding rail, access to rail transportation for coal. I'm not sure if you're the person to ask that of, but if you could identify, either provide an answer or suggest what future witness might be able to talk about. What's the background for that? Why is that a challenge?
Well, certainly I think Mr. Shin would probably be the appropriate one to give you more color. You know, I'm assuming just COVID issues with the CSX's and you know, staff levels. You know, they have limited employees to run these trains up and down the tracks. There's probably a number of other issues related to that, but I think Mr. Shin would probably be the best one to give you a detailed answer.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I just want to ask a clarifying question. I know my colleagues asked you all a lot about outages and the plant being offline, but that didn't result in any ratepayer suffering any disruption in service, did it?
No, sir.
No, sir. As I mentioned, we've been able to keep the plants available for service when called upon to dispatch as needed.
All right. Any redirect?
No redirect from the company, Your Honor. Mr. Chairman.
All right. Gentlemen, thank you very much. You may step down.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Let's take our first break. We'll come back at 11:15.
Mr. Chairman, before we do that, could these two witnesses be excused, please?
Absolutely, sir. Gentlemen, you're excused. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome, good morning still. Welcome back to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. We're here in docket number 2022-2-E. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioner J. Williams Caston, Commissioner C. Williams, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Powers, and Commissioner Belzer. Joining us virtually, we have Commissioner Urban. Are we ready with the next panel, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
All right.
The company calls to the stand Rose M. Jackson, Michael D. Shin, and Tom A. Brookmeyer. Mr. Chairman, are you ready to proceed with swearing in?
Yes.
If you would raise your right hands, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Ms. Jackson, please state your name for the record.
My name is Rose Moore Jackson.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Dominion Energy Services Incorporated as the Director of Gas Supply Services.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direct supervision 11 pages of direct testimony that was pre-filed with the Commission on February 7th, 2022?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did your pre-filed direct testimony include any exhibits?
Yes, sir, it did. It included one exhibit marked RMJ-1.
Do you have any changes to your direct testimony?
I have an update to my testimony based on the current fuel prices. The updates to my testimony are on page 10, line 6. If you would please delete the beginning of the sentence that reads, "As the close of the winter period approaches," and capitalize the T and the, which will begin the sentence. And then on page 10, line 8, strike approximately $5 and replace with above $6.
If I asked you all the questions contained in your pre-filed direct testimony subject to that correction here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I move that the pre-filed direct testimony as corrected of Ms. Rose M. Jackson with the exhibit be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Rose M. Jackson's corrected pre-filed direct testimony will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Ms. Jackson, have you prepared a summary of your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, sir, I have.
Give me 1 second, ma'am. So I noticed you have an exhibit with the direct testimony. Did you want to enter that now, or did you want to wait?
Yes, Mr. Commissioner, we would like to enter that now as the next hearing exhibit.
All right, if you would offer it, and I will enter it.
I offer exhibit RMJ1 as the next hearing exhibit.
All right. Exhibit RMJ1 will be marked and entered into the record as hearing exhibit number 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Jackson, have you prepared a summary of your pre-filed direct testimony?
Yes, sir, I have.
Will you please present that summary at this time to the Commission?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Chairman Williams and members of the Commission. On behalf of Dominion Energy South Carolina, or DESC, I am appearing before you today to provide information about the natural gas purchasing process for DESC generation. To discuss natural gas prices for the review period of January 1st, 2021 through December 31st, 2021, and to offer the outlook for natural gas prices in the near term. The gas prices made by the Gas Supply Department are driven by the needs of the Electric Generation Group. Our department provides DESC Economic Resource Commitment Group, or ERC, with current market information that can be used in the electric generation dispatch modeling to determine the most economic means of reliably meeting the electric needs of our customers. Once ERC decides that natural gas is the economical choice for providing reliable power to our customers, our department is directed to purchase gas supplies for delivery with a stated term and volume at the best available current market prices. Prices in the NYMEX natural gas commodity market began the review period at $2.58 per decatherm. Colder than normal temperatures in February pushed natural gas commodity prices as high as $3.22 per decatherm before a return to normal temperatures. Prices then retreated to the year's lowest daily settle price of $2.45 per decatherm in mid-March. Natural gas commodity prices began to rise over the course of the spring and through the summer. The national storage inventory showed a lagging response for the summer refill period. The lack of storage refill and increased demand for exported liquefied natural gas, along with industry analysts indicating minimal supply production increases, supported pressure for higher natural gas commodity prices. Entering the fourth quarter of 2021, natural gas prices saw their peak on the 5th day of October at $6.31 per decatherm, and from there prices slowly retreated. The downturn in prices can be attributed to milder forecasted temperatures and the national storage inventory reaching previous year's levels. Natural gas prices closed out the year at $3.73 per decatherm. During the review period, DES purchased approximately 94 million decatherms of natural gas for electric generation at a total cost of approximately $355 million and at an approximate average price of $3.77 per decatherm. The current price forecast for the remainder of 2022 suggests natural gas prices are likely to average above $6 per decatherm. However, short-term price volatility can result from changes in either supply or demand. In conclusion, I respectfully request that the Commission find that DES's natural gas purchasing practices for electric generation were reasonable and prudent. This concludes my summary.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Shin, please state your name for the record.
Michael Davis Shin.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by Dominion Energy Services Incorporated, and I am manager of fuel origination.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 22 pages of direct testimony that was pre-filed with the Commission on February 7th, 2022?
I did.
Did your pre-filed direct testimony include any exhibits?
It did not.
Do you have any changes or additions to your direct testimony?
No, I do not.
If I asked you all of the questions contained in your pre-filed direct testimony here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, it would.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I move that the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Michael Shin be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
The pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Michael D. Shin will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Shin, have you prepared a summary of your pre-filed direct testimony in these proceedings?
I have.
Will you please present that summary at this time to the Commission?
Certainly. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. The purpose of my testimony is to describe the procurement and delivery of the coal, No. 2 fuel oil, limestone, and associated transportation that is used in Dominion Energy South Carolina's non-nuclear power generation plants, while focusing on the reliability of supply, conformity with operational environmental requirements, and obtaining reasonable prices. I also discuss changes that have occurred in coal markets since the last annual fuel adjustment hearing and how these changes affected coal procurement during the review period. During the review period, the company's long-term agreements provided 65% of DES coal receipts, and spot purchases accounted for the remaining 35% of coal deliveries. Both percentages align with the company's preferred coal procurement balance. During the 2021 review period, DES consumed 1,891,851 tons of coal in the production of electricity for its customers at an average delivered cost in dollars per MBTU by month ranging from $3.01 in January to $3.44 in December. The company projects that its burn rate for coal in 2022 will be approximately 1.8 million tons. And as an update, since the filing of my testimony, the forecast for 2022 coal prices have trended upward and are currently in the $145 per ton range FOB mine with very limited availability. The company currently has contracts in place that are projected to meet a balance of 90% of coal supplies through long-term contracts and 10% through short-term contracts in 2022. DES does not anticipate soliciting suppliers of coal for additional long-term contracts in 2022, but given current market dynamics, the company could have a need to pursue short-term purchases of coal during the remainder of 2022. The company targeted to maintain an inventory of approximately 680,125 tons of coal during the review period based on a 12-month ending inventory average to support anticipated consumption during the period. This targeted inventory level is enough coal to run each coal unit at full capacity for approximately 45 days. This targeted inventory level protects DESC and its customers against lack of coal availability, insulates against production and delivery problems that may arise from time to time, and serves to meet our supply needs when short-term market prices are unfavorable, natural gas availability issues arise, or a lack of solar generation occurs. While the company did not receive any deliveries of international coal during the review period, DESC has the capability to do so on an as-needed basis when availability allows and prices for international coal are competitive with domestically produced coal. During the review period, DESC did experience transportation delays that lasted for an extended period of time. These delays resulted from an increased need for transportation services due to the economic emergence from the COVID-19 economic slowdown. The sudden increased need for rail freight services led to a lack of qualified rail crews to move freight. During the review period, the market saw increased natural gas prices both here and abroad, which increased the need for coal internationally, resulting in a strengthening export coal market from the U.S. In order to ensure reliable operation of its coal-fired generation facilities, DESC altered its dispatch strategies to ensure that its coal inventory for the review period and forecast period was sufficient to meet the needs of the system. DESC also entered a new agreement for the rail transport of coal to Wateree beginning on January 1st, 2022, with an additional transport supplier to help maintain adequate inventories. Prices for delivered number 2 fuel oil are based on market indices that adjust daily and are competitively solicited every 2 years. The company's average monthly prices during the review period range from a high of $18.52 per million BTU in October to a low of $12.01 per million BTU in January. The fuel department also purchases or trades EPA sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide emission allowances as required. The company did not have any need to pursue any transactions due to the fact that it emits less than its EPA allocated SO2 and NOx emission allowances. The fuel procurement department is also responsible for securing adequate and reliable supplies of environmental reagents for the operation of various pollution control systems at the company's power generation facilities. The company's purchasing strategies remain effective and market priced. In conclusion, the company made reasonable and prudent efforts to obtain reliable, high-quality supplies of coal, number 2 fuel oil, lime, ammonia, limestone, and associated transportation at the lowest possible cost to DESC's customers. Therefore, I respectfully request that the Commission find that the company's fuel purchasing practices were reasonable and prudent for the review period. Thank you for your time. This completes the summary of my testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Shin. Mr. Brookmeyer, please state your name for the record.
My name is Tom A. Brookmeyer.
By whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm a manager of nuclear fuel procurement at Dominion Energy Services Incorporated in Richmond, Virginia.
Did you prepare or cause to be prepared under your direction 8 pages of direct testimony that was pre-filed with the Commission on February 7th, 2022?
Yes, I did.
Did your pre-filed direct testimony include any exhibits?
Yes, one exhibit identified as TAB-1.
Do you have any changes or additions to your direct testimony?
I do not.
And if I asked you all the questions contained in your pre-filed direct testimony here today, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Mr. Chairman, at this time, I move that the pre-filed direct testimony of Mr. Tom Brookmeyer with the exhibit marked TAB-1 be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Tom A. Brookmeyer's direct testimony will be entered into the record as given orally from the stand. Exhibit TAB-1 will be marked and entered into the record as hearing exhibit number 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Brookmeyer, have you prepared a summary of your pre-filed direct testimony in these proceedings?
Yes, I have.
Will you please present the summary at this time to the commission?
Yes. Good morning, Chairman and members of the commission. My testimony explains the nuclear fuel purchasing process for Dominion Energy South Carolina Incorporated, also sometimes referred to here as DESC, and discusses the prices for conversion services, enrichment services, fuel fabrication, and uranium U-308, the raw version of that product that we purchase. And these are all termed as front-end components. And I also provide in the testimony and in this review period a near-term outlook of both spot and term prices for the front-end components. The Nuclear Fuel Procurement, or NFP, group of Dominion Energy Services Incorporated uses nuclear refueling forecasts to plan the refueling requirements for Dominion's nuclear fleet. The NFP group then procures the uranium and associated services to meet the fleet's refueling requirements. The NFP group must also ensure that its procurement activities account for the long lead time that is required to process the uranium that is eventually loaded into Dominion Energy South Carolina's VC Summer Unit 1. Generally, the company's nuclear fuel procurement contracts are in excess of 2 years, and currently the company has long-term commitments for uranium, conversion services, enrichment services, and fabrication for VC Summer Unit 1. The company's procurement process also includes maintaining a stock of uranium inventory, which is designed to provide a security of supply for future reactor requirements by mitigating potential market disruptions. Over the upcoming years, the company anticipates increasing the diversity of supply of uranium, conversion, and enrichment contracts available to DESC as existing legacy contracts expire. Simultaneously, the NFP group continues to monitor the nuclear fuel market to evaluate spot market opportunities, as such opportunities would allow the company to supplement long-term contract supplies as appropriate. In sum, the company respectfully requests the Commission find that the company's nuclear fuel purchasing practices were reasonable and prudent for the review period. This concludes a summary of my direct testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Brookmeyer. Mr. Chairman, Ms. Jackson, Mr. Shin, and Mr. Brookmeyer are available for questioning from the parties and from the Commission.
Thank you very much, sir. Cross-examination. Attorney Elliott.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'll ask you the same question I asked the previous panel. Anybody got any idea what kind of rate increase y'all are seeking in this docket?
Mr. Elliott, I looked at Mr. Rook's direct testimony, and based on what we're filing, the average residential customer using 1,000 kilowatt hours per month, and this shows up on page 16, lines 13 through 21 of Mr. Rook's testimony. It looks like there's a $7.41 increase, or a 5.88% increase that includes fuel and DSM. And of that, $6.53 would be associated with fuel.
And that's for a residential customer using 1,000 kilowatts per month,
Yes,
per day,
sir.
per month.
Yes, sir.
It's a smaller number than the one I'm thinking about. How about the industrial customer class? Do you have any idea what the rate increase you're requesting on the industrial customer class is here?
Mr. Rooks would be the witness to ask about that.
And the same about the commercial customer class?
Yes, sir.
No idea. Okay. Mr. Brookmeyer, I just have one limited line of questioning with you, and it may just be one question. If I may draw your attention in your testimony to page 6 of 8, and in particular, I'll draw your attention to line 8 of that direct testimony.
Okay, so page 6, line 8.
Yes, sir. And
Yes.
you testified Kazakhstan remains the largest global uranium production source by far. Recent events there so far are not expected to cause much, if any, real supply disruption, but may ultimately increase some global utility interest in potential uranium mine restarts and new production. Do you see that testimony?
Yes.
And do I infer correctly that when you speak of recent events there, you're referring to the Russian invasion of Ukraine?
No, sir, that's referring to the unrest that took place in January in Kazakhstan.
All right, sir. And so that limiting your testimony to that, you don't see much impact on the uranium market?
We we expect some impact based on the Russian-Ukrainian invasion, but it's uncertain at this time where that's going to settle.
Okay, all right. Thank you. You've answered my question. It would be a good thing for additional mines to reopen as a result, though, wouldn't it?
We would certainly look forward to that as increased competition, yes.
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, very fine. Usually it's ladies first, Ms. Jackson, but I think I'm saving you for last. Mr. Shin.
Yes, sir.
Just to help me understand some of your testimony and perhaps elaborate on a little bit of it. Now, as I understand it, just a brief review, a long-term coal contract is a contract of 1 year in duration or longer, correct?
Correct.
And by policy, a matter of policy, if you will, Dominion has a range of roughly 60 to 80% of its coal purchases by long-term contract, correct?
Correct.
And by virtue of that, you would buy maybe, by policy, 20 to 40% on the spot market.
Correct.
All right, and I think you testified that for the test year, you're right on target, right? 65% long-term and 35% short-term.
Correct.
Or spot. Now, I want you to, you testified in your summary as to some numbers I wasn't prepared to hear, if you will, so help me understand my confusion. May I draw your attention, please, to page 7 of your testimony? And in particular, I would draw your attention to page, to line 8.
Okay.
All right. Now, I did not hear you testify to this, and there may be a good reason for it, but I just want an explanation. On line 8, you testify that for 2020, Dominion received 1,429,942 tons of coal. Do I understand that correctly?
Correct.
All right. I thought you, again, I thought I understood you in your summary to use different numbers. And so do I understand correctly that your testimony is that for 2021, Dominion received 1,758,660 tons of coal? Do I understand that correctly?
Correct.
And according to your testimony, you have conveniently informed me that that's about a 19% increase of delivered coal in 21 over 20?
Yes.
All right. And let's turn right and go to page 8 of your testimony. And beginning roughly at line 11, you testify that Dominion currently has long-term contracts with 7 suppliers for the delivery of 2,044,980 tons of coal for 2022?
Correct.
And we read further in your testimony on page 9, line 7, roughly, that Dominion anticipates delivery of about 213,000 tons of coal on the spot market. Is that correct?
Correct.
Did
under long-term. Yeah.
Yes, sir. All right. Did I understand you to use a 1.8 million tons of delivered coal? Did you round up, or did I misunderstand you in your summary? It's a small thing, but I was trying to keep up.
I'd have to look back at it.
Don't worry about it. It's not that important. All right, so as I understand it, you, Dominion, for the coming year, for 2022, you will buy 90% of your coal on long-term contract and limit your spot to 10%. Have I got that correct?
Well, based on the fuel forecast at the time, whenever we did this testimony, the amount of coal that we had under long-term contract on paper, yes, it would have amounted to that 90%.
All right, and let's explore that a little bit, because I think things have changed, and I'll tell you, I'm not looking at history, I'm looking at I want you to put your future cap on here, so it's important to my client. So, you've got 7 long-term coal suppliers, correct?
Correct.
And as I understand it, y'all are very careful to vet your coal suppliers, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you rely on coal suppliers who have a good track record in meeting their contract terms, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, you testify that there are some forces that might come to bear that might have an impact on the performance of these 7 coal suppliers. Do I understand your testimony correctly? All right. So tell me and the commission what forces beyond your control might come to bear, and if you have experienced some situations so far where the coal providers have not complied with their contract, I want you to speak to those specifically. So first of all, what sorts of things out beyond your control might lead to a coal supplier's failure to deliver the coal you contracted for?
Well, there are many factors, and we can start at the mine itself. And one of those would be just any kind of, and everybody kind of works off permits. You got to have environmental permits and certain allowances from governmental agencies. And, you know, if there are any delays on upcoming as they mine out of one area and moving into another, you know, some of these issues might come up. And not that this has happened to our suppliers, some might be revoked in certain instances. But for the most part, our suppliers during the review period, the issues just turned out to be supply chains, spare parts. That turned into a large issue when gas prices were extremely low levels over the last few years. There wasn't a lot of spare money on their parts in order to be able to stockpile a lot of spares or order new equipment.
And let me interrupt you a second. We're talking about spare parts for the mining operation.
For the mining equipment, yes, sir. So they let a fair amount of people go just because the amount of coal required in the market dropped substantially. You know, you can look in my testimony where we only took, I think it was $1.4 million versus $1.7 million in some years, versus what we're expecting to take this year. So all of these different things on their side really make a difference as far as how much coal that they can produce. And when markets change quickly, they have to go out and find people. They have to go out and find trucks. They got to, you know, increase their spare parts. And during that period, like we were talking about, where coal wasn't very popular, you know, a lot of manufacturers, such as high wall equipment manufacturers, just quit making high wall miner machines. So, you know, there were very few of them being used at the time, so they didn't need a lot of the spare parts, so they just quit making spare parts for them.
Okay.
A lot of our suppliers have had to go out with plans and take them to a machine shop, and they had to actually machine them themselves, get them done on the fly. So from that standpoint, at the mines, you know, all of those things have to be worked through over time, and are doing so. Now the railroad, if the railroad doesn't pick up the coal, then, you know, the miner can't ship the coal. So that leads to some deficiencies with certain suppliers just based off of that. And those keep building throughout the year as long as the rail assets cannot keep up with the loadings.
And so is it fair to say that those were at least your test year experiences?
So, well, those are ongoing experiences, but during the test year, they were particularly troublesome.
And I think you testified that you would anticipate that coal at these rates would be sufficient to assist these miners to recapitalize their equipment and their plants and so forth, their mines and so forth?
Yes, sir.
Okay. In 2008, when then E&G had a similar spike in rates, some of your coal suppliers were just simply refusing to honor their contracts. Have you experienced that, or do you anticipate that?
I would not say we've experienced it. In 2008, it's probably better to put it this way. A lot of the folks that did that sort of thing in 2008 are not in business today.
Good.
Because they developed a reputation for not honoring their contracts and nobody would do business with them. So those have fallen by the wayside, and the ones that are left today, that has not been my experience. But I would not be naive enough to say it might not happen to some limited degree.
All right, and in 2008, when we had this spike, there were coal mine bankruptcies. Is that a thing of the past?
I don't see a bankruptcy coming anytime soon. No, sir. I wouldn't say it's a thing of the past, though.
I do want to come back to your history of coal receipts for the last 3 years. You testified, I'm going to use just real rounded numbers, but you testified that in 2020, Dominion received about $1.4 million in, 1.4 million tons of coal. In 2021, it increased by 19% to roughly 1.75 million tons of coal. And then you're anticipating, at least, it's in 2022 receiving about 2.2 million tons of coal. Have I summarized that correctly?
Yes, sir.
I'd like you to explain why your coal receipts are increasing year over year, at least why they've increased year over year for the last 3 years.
Well, certainly. In 2020, we had some fairly extensive outages. Cope Station, which Mr. Dell mentioned earlier, is dual fired. Well, they had to replace a bag house during that year. So for a good portion of the summer, Cope Station was not available to run coal at all. So we just, we didn't purchase it because we knew they couldn't use it. We've also had extensive outages at Watery Station. I don't recall the specific years, but has impacted their ability to take coal. But it also depends on what natural gas prices were. Back in 2020, natural gas prices were probably particularly low. I don't have exact numbers. 2021, the review period, you got to a point, I think, during the year, we saw estimates that we might burn up to 2.6 million tons. Well, as gas prices went up, coal prices went up, and those numbers started to trend back down because gas was the cheapest energy form to use. And that is the case in 2022 as well. We started purchasing coal last year based on forecasts that showed us consuming a large amount of coal, which is why you see that 90% number somewhat versus, more within our guideline range. So for this year, I don't suspect that we're gonna do the 2.2 million tons as far as burn. We do have those as far as contracted, just due to certain issues such as the railroad, that railroad and some supplier performance that may or may not happen.
And what's Dominion's liability if it does not purchase the coal that you've committed to?
We don't. I don't expect there to be any liability.
Okay. And is it fair to say that during the last 2 or 3 years that Dominion, as gas prices have gone up, Dominion finds itself relying more on coal than it did when gas prices were lower?
Well, I mean, it depends on the price. you know, whatever the cheapest form of generation is, that's what we will economically try and use.
Now, you've got 90% of your coal on long-term contracts. Are the prices per ton locked in on those long-term contracts?
Yes, sir, for the most part. Now, let me rephrase that. Yes, they are locked in, but due to market forces that are going on today, you know, there are issues such as diesel, you know, which a lot of our suppliers heavily use, has more than doubled in price. And the cost structure being what it is, you know, puts them at shipping these contracts at a loss. So there are some off chance that some of these contracts we might have to look at trying to modify that price somewhat to keep them in business.
And do the contracts permit the coal suppliers to renegotiate the terms under certain circumstances?
For the most part, not. Some contracts have fuel adjustment clauses, some do not.
Okay. And when you say some, you're referring to some of the contracts with your 7 long-term suppliers have the fuel adjustment provisions, and some of the 7 do not.
Correct.
Okay. Now, you testified that you testified that the Central Appalachian coal price ranged, I think, during the test year period from, I can't read my handwriting, $50.75 a ton to as high as $92 a ton. Does that sound right?
Yes, sir.
All right. And I think you testified in your summary, you updated us that spot coal was now as high as $145 a ton.
Correct.
All right. So by using these long-term contracts and by purchasing 90% of your coal under these long-term contracts, you've limited your exposure to $145 a ton coal on the spot market, haven't you?
Correct.
All right. And so have you, based on your most recent internal forecast, if you will, if you have one, I assume you have one, what impact would you anticipate $145 per ton coal on the spot market would have on your fuel purchasing costs for 2022?
It will suppress coal burn.
Okay.
It'll lower it.
So one way to mitigate that cost is just to burn more gas, assuming it is reasonably affordable.
Correct.
Okay. Indulge me, Mr. Chairman. You do have, just last, you've got some testimony in your pre-filed, and I didn't note the page, but you'll recognize it, that the cost of coal could vary depending on seasonality, climate change. I think you used the word political upheaval. I would agree with that term, but there may be a more politically correct way to say all that. Would you please tell me a little bit about the seasonality, how that would impact your coal purchases?
Well, certainly. You know, during the summer, you're going to tend to burn more coal when energy demands are higher, and same for the winter. And if gas availability is lower than what you might want, or either it's more than what you want to pay. There's operational flow orders and things like that are associated with gas. So
you still have the opportunity, high demand, lower demand, to play off the coal the gas availability. And does Dominion sort of handicap the future of coal, you know, with respect to the current political or environmental trends?
In what way do you mean?
All right. Well, do you anticipate that current political trends will drive up the price of coal?
I would say, I mean, regardless of Dominion Energy, you have nothing to do with it. Those have already driven up, the production cost of coal.
Okay.
Anyway, which in turn will drive up the price of coal.
All right, sir. That's all I have, Mr. Shin. Thank you very much.
That's right.
And Ms. Jackson, I've saved the best for last. I want to draw your attention first, if I may, to pages 6 and 7 of your testimony.
Yes, sir.
And this will all be familiar to you. But I'm referring you to a question found on page 6, line 12. What natural gas transportation capacity does DESC have for the generating facilities that it operates? You see that?
Yes, sir.
All right. I want to talk a little bit about these pipelines. I'm more concerned about the pipelines than decatherms. As I understand it, the Jasper plant, which I understand to be operated as a baseload plant, receives its gas from Elba Island.
No, sir, that's not exactly correct.
Where does it receive it?
They receive gas from Southern Natural and Elba Express pipeline, which can deliver both Southern Natural and Transco supply.
All right, good. Hold that thought.
Okay.
Urquhart would be strictly Southern Natural, right?
It is connected to Southern Natural. However, we can serve it through displacement via Transco.
All right, hold that thought.
Okay.
Columbia, here in Calhoun County, where do they get their gas? What supplier? What pipeline?
It's primarily through Transco, but once again, we can also serve them through Southern Natural as well via displacement.
All right. Now, last, I think you talk a little bit about this Pleasant Valley Transco Cove Point interconnection. I'm on page 7. In Fairfax County, with a interconnection in Fairfax County, Virginia.
Yes, sir.
Near Mr. Brookmeyer, and exiting Transco Station 65 pooling point in Louisiana. Explain your access to that pipeline, please.
That pipeline path runs from that interconnect of Pleasant Valley down to Station 65, but the delivery points off of Transco that are in the path that serve DESC are Grover and Moore. So those are considered in the path points on that piece of capacity.
And where's Moore?
Moore is located in the northwestern part of the state.
Moore, South Carolina?
Yes.
Okay. And is that considered Zone 5 on Transco?
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay. Now, you talked about being able to supply your gas plants either through SONAT or through displacement.
Yes, sir.
With
through
Transco?
Mm-hmm.
Would you describe or explain what you mean by the displacement?
Yes, sir. What we can do is, depending on where gas prices are lower, we can buy the gas on Transco and deliver it to Carolina Gas Transmission, and then take that gas to, say, Columbia Energy Center, and then use the Southern capacity to serve other plants through Southern directly, or to the LDC. Okay, because you have, in other words, because you might have, the option of delivering the gas through two different lines. Yes, sir.
You can sort of protect yourself by having sufficient gas available to your various plants. Is that a decent summary?
Yes, sir. And you get to choose which pipeline capacity offers the lowest commodity cost on that given day.
Now, of some concern are the constraints, the capacity constraints on Transco at Zone 5. Have you experienced any constraints at Zone 5 on Transco?
We haven't experienced any constraints because we have firm transportation. However, we have seen some dramatic changes in prices in Zone 5.
Do you recall the amounts?
I can't recall the exact amounts. Last year during the polar vortex event that dramatically impacted Texas, we did see prices go up in Transco Zone 5.
Would you have seen them go as high as 20 or a little higher than 20 per decatherm?
That sounds reasonable, subject to check.
Okay. And so sort of a solution to that would be to somehow use your capacity on Sonat to deliver the gas to Columbia?
That's a possibility, but we have also signed a precedent agreement with Mountain Valley Pipeline that will interconnect with that capacity you're referring to on Southeastern Trail, and that will give us access to lower cost supply out of the Marcellus region.
But they're running behind, I think, according to your testimony, and it'll be another year, be the 2023 at the earliest?
They have not provided us with an updated estimated in-service date, but based on previous delays, we're estimating that to be at least a year.
And I asked Mr. Shin a question of this nature and would ask you, and that is political or environmental concerns have delayed or even terminated pipeline construction. What do you anticipate at Dominion concerning the availability of additional pipeline or additional capacity created by additional pipelines?
I would say that this is an unprecedented time in the natural gas market, and 5 years ago or 7 years ago, I would be very confident in giving this commission an estimate of a 3-year timeline from the pre-application, the application filing at FERC to the in-service date of an interstate pipeline. Now, I would say 7+ years for that same type of project. And the concern that I have is it's not just the political or the federal legislation, it's the litigation associated with these projects. But natural gas infrastructure will be key to supporting renewables, and it is key to the decarbonization of our system. So I'm very concerned about how long it could take to see additional natural gas infrastructure to be able to come into our system to provide for domestic supplies so we don't have to rely on other countries.
What impact, if any, do you think liquefied natural gas and ramping up production to supply Europe might have on your gas supplies and the cost of gas to you?
I think there's a fallacy associated with the comments that we've heard about trying to help Europe with increased exportation of liquefied natural gas. Yes, we have the ability to increase production, but we don't have the pipeline infrastructure to get it to the export terminals, nor do I think that this country would allow expansion at those export terminals to be able to move gas overseas to help Europe. So while everybody wants to focus on the supply piece, the infrastructure to move that supply, such as what we're talking about with Mountain Valley Pipeline, we need to be able to move that gas from the Marcellus region down to the southeast where we desperately need it in order to continue to serve our customers reliably.
So do I understand you correctly that, that based on your estimate of 7 years to build the necessary infrastructure and the lack of political will to expand or build new liquefied natural gas terminals, you're skeptical that that would have an impact?
Yes, sir.
Now, I do want to ask you about hedging. Y'all don't hedge, do you?
No, sir, we do not.
All right. I would like for you...
We do not financially hedge. I apologize. I want to correct that.
Well, explain what you do, what hedging you do.
Well, what we are allowed to, what we do to enable us to compare the prices of the different fuels is we look at 12 months in advance and we look at what the different fuels are trading at, and we can acquire a certain portion of our portfolio at a index price or a fixed price as long as that price is lower than the alternatives. So in my mind, that's physical hedging, but we do not have a financial hedging plan in place.
Well, tell me how much gas you physically hedge.
I don't know the exact numbers because we have updated for this winter season, so I don't know those specifically.
I mean, I'll take an estimate.
I'm sorry, I don't have that with me.
Well, is it a substantial amount? Is it a?
It's less than half.
Okay. Now, you testified, do me a favor, please. You made 2 corrections to your testimony. One was on page 10, line 8, where you raised that estimate to $6 from $5.
Yes, sir.
But I missed the first one. What was the other change?
If you go to the, on line 6, I just struck that as the close of the winter period approaches. At the time my testimony was filed on February 7th, this was correct. But in order to update that and accurately state it, I deleted that, and then all you do is capitalize the T and B.
All right.
So the sentence begins with the
Same
current
page.
price. Yes, sir. Page 10, line 6.
Indulge me. So delete at the close of the winter period approaches, just
Yes,
delete
sir.
that phrase?
Mhm. And the sentence should begin with the current price forecast for the remainder of 2022.
And then I think on line 8, you said you would maybe delete approximately and $5, and you'd put above $6.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right, and so what has the historic cost of gas per decatherm been from January 1 through March 31st?
Well, as I stated in my testimony right there on that same page, page 10, line 5, during the review period, which was the calendar year 2021, the average price of gas that we paid for generation was $3.77 per decatherm.
Yes, ma'am. And so after December 31, I'm just looking for the historical experience for January, February, and March of this year. Do you know those numbers?
Yes, sir. If you look at the NYMEX settle prices, which is an indication of the market price, the January expiration was $4.02, February was $6.27, March was $4.57, and April is $5.34. And you can see on February 7th, based on what we were seeing in the market, prices were expected to average around $5. However, that was prior to the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
And what impact do you think reasonably it will have on gas prices?
I do think that this forecast of an average above $6 could occur, but right now with all the political unrest around the globe, I don't know what kind of impact we will have long term.
Very fine. Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Office of Regulatory Staff.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, this is Emma Clancy on behalf of CCL and SACE. I do have some questions for Ms. Jackson. I don't want to jump in front of ORS, but I do know that they generally prefer to go last.
Okay. Attorney Hare, do you have any cross-examination? Just checking in with you.
I do not, Mr. Chairman, for any of the witnesses on this panel.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Attorney Clancy?
Great, thank you. Good morning, Ms. Jackson, or good day. My name is Emma Clancy and I represent CCL and SACE. I hope you're doing well today. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, ma'am, thank you.
Great. So apologies in advance if I cover some of the same ground as Mr. Elliott, but I'll try to keep it short. Now on page 5 of your testimony, you state that that gas prices have become more stable in the last few years, and as a result, the company has increased its use of gas to fuel its generating resources. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am, but I remind you that this testimony was filed on February 7th of this year.
Okay.
So a lot has changed since that date.
Okay. And in fact, though gas plants provided about 47% of the company's generation over the review period, according to ORS witness Bickley's testimony. Does that sound right to you?
Subject to check.
And does the company have plans to invest in additional gas in years to come in light of this trend?
Just to clarify, what do you mean by invest in gas?
Build more gas generation.
As I stated previously, natural gas infrastructure will be key to supporting renewables until battery technology advances dramatically.
Okay, and so does that mean that the company does have plans to build additional gas generation?
In order to decarbonize our system and to retire coal generation plants, natural gas will be needed to support that unless there is further development in battery technology that would support additional large-scale renewables on the system.
Okay, thank you. Now, you submitted testimony on gas prices in last year's fuel proceeding. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Now, bear with me. I'm going to pull up, share my screen. Just 1 second. Sorry. And now can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
And you state here that in last year's testimony, you stated that gas prices ranged from $1.43 to $3.39 over the 2020 review period. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, I see that on the screen.
Right. And moving down the page, I'll go to the next slide so you can see it clearly. You state that that the current forecast for the remainder of 2021 suggests natural gas prices are likely to average below $3 per decatherm as the winter period comes to a close. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, I see that.
Okay, great. Now I'll just unshare my screen. And now you covered some of this with Mr. Elliott, but just to clarify, the prices over the 2021 review period ended up ranging from $2.45 to $6.31.
Yes, that's correct.
And sorry, one more share. And in the exhibit, in your exhibit attached to your direct testimony, you illustrate those fluctuations throughout the review period. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. This shows the 2021 NYMEX daily settle prices as an indication of natural gas market prices.
Great. And I've shared that exhibit for everyone to see. Stop that now. So prices over the review period for this proceeding jumped to more than double the expected average value. Is that correct?
Our average during the review period ended up being $3.77 per decatherm.
Right. Right, but in your testimony last year, you stated that you expected the prices to remain below $3. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, because at the time my testimony would have been filed in early February. That was prior to the polar vortex event that impacted Texas and drew down our national storage levels, which created the additional demand in the summer and increased prices at that time.
Right, and the average ended up being, for the past review period, $3.77.
Yes, ma'am.
And the expected, and just, I think as you stated in per your correction, you expect prices over the remainder of 2022 to remain above $6.
That is what we're seeing from analysts in the natural gas industry today, but it is changing within a day. Prices are up 10 cents from yesterday. If you looked at some of the EIA short-term forecast in early March, they were still saying around $4. When I filed my testimony, I stated around $5. So we're in an unprecedented time with global forces that we cannot control that's impacting pricing.
Right, and actually on page 10 of your testimony, you list a number, not an inclusive list, but a number of factors that can cause the type of short-term gas volatility that we've been experiencing so much lately. Is that correct? That's on page 10.
Yes, ma'am, that's some of those that can impact us domestically. But as
And
we've
those
seen.
are, oh, excuse me, sorry. I
Oh, I'm
interrupted.
sorry. As we've seen, now we're seeing international impacts as the global demand for natural gas changes.
Okay, so in addition to weather, changes in customer demand, changes in supplies, changes in storage inventory, and constraints in pipeline capacity, we're seeing pressures from the international gas market.
Yes, ma'am. These are considered fundamental factors that I have in my testimony on page 10.
Great, thank you. And so the spikes in gas price, such as those that we saw in 2021, impact customers when the company's increased fuel costs are passed to them through the fuel rider. Is that right?
The company makes no margin on the fuel costs, so we pass through the cost that we have paid for that fuel that has produced the energy that's used by our customers.
Right. But by its very nature, the fuel rider at issue in this proceeding passes fuel costs and other costs to customers, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
And when gas prices exceed forecast values, as was the case this year, and the company has to spend more than anticipated to procure gas, the company doesn't just absorb those additional costs, rather it recovers that extra expense from customers through the next fuel rider proceeding. Is that correct?
That's correct, but we do not forecast prices. Those are forecasts that we receive from third parties.
Okay, but essentially when prices spike, when there are unexpected price spikes, customers will see the impact of those through the fuel rider.
If we incur additional costs by the procurement of fuel, that is passed on through the fuel costs.
Right, and price spikes such as those driven by the volatility in recent months will cause the company to incur additional costs in procurement of fuel, correct?
That's what we filed in this case, that we did have an increase.
Great. Okay, and so to that point, would you agree that the 2021 spikes in gas prices are a primary driver of the increase to the proposed rider?
I think that we have seen increases in both natural gas and coal, as Mr. Shin has testified to.
Okay.
And oil, for that matter.
Excuse me, sorry?
I'm sorry, the cost of oil has gone up as well.
Okay, and did the company have to rely on additional coal in part because of the gas price spikes that may have put gas resources out of economic dispatch?
As we've both Mr. Shin and I have stated, we provide the data to Economic Resource Commitment. They run those fuel prices through their models and they dispatch on the most economic or the lowest priced fuel to provide reliable service. So it does give us the ability to dispatch the lowest price fuel.
Okay, but I guess whether or not the spikes in gas price that we've seen are whether those cause increase in the company's fuel costs or they cause increased use of a more expensive fuel, that gas volatility will drive an increase in the fuel rider, as we've seen in this docket. Is that correct?
But I think we have to look at what the other fuels were trading at the point in time in which those gas purchases were made, because you have to look and see what were the other alternatives priced at.
Okay, but we're looking at the whole fuel rider, the increase being proposed in this docket, you agree that the price spikes in the last year are driving that increase?
We did have an increase in prices, yes, ma'am.
Okay, so assuming the company approves the fuel rider as proposed by the company, customers will bear an increased cost burden from those spikes in gas prices, correct?
They'll incur a cost associated with the actual purchases that were made. We may not have matched, our exact purchases may not have matched the chart that we use as an example of natural gas prices.
Right. But increased prices will likely lead to some increased cost burden.
Yes, ma'am, as Mr. Rooks has filed in his testimony.
Right. Thank you for mentioning that.
And so let's assume that the company does invest in substantially more natural gas in the future, as you noted was a possibility. The company would have the opportunity to earn a return on its investment in that generation infrastructure. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And let's say we're in a future fuel case after those additional gas resources are operating. And in that future review period, there are higher gas prices than expected, or price spikes similar to the ones that we saw in 2021. Those future price spikes could have an even larger impact on future customers' bills because compared to now, an even larger portion of the company's generation would be made up of gas. Is that right?
Attorney
Mr.
Clancy, if you would give me 1 second, I think I have an objection.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is the fuel purchasing cost review of our annual purchases. There's no generation at issue in the docket. I would object to this as out of the scope of the hearing, irrelevant, and simply not needed.
Attorney Clancy, response?
Yes, I think to the extent the cost of fuel has a bearing on future generation decisions and trends in gas prices, I think that is relevant to the proceeding. As we've seen, the makeup of the company's generation has a direct bearing on the fuel rider that's ultimately passed to customers.
Objection sustained. Please move on.
Okay, give me just 1 second, sorry. I will just end it there then. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. I appreciate it.
All right, Commissioner questions for these witnesses. Commissioner Caston.
Good afternoon. Ladies first, Ms. Jackson. I was actually going to ask something totally different, but something Attorney Elliott asked, I wanted to make sure I understood your response. Because through much of this, I've been kind of wanting to say, now why have gas prices gone up? And I'm not sure I've actually heard exactly why, but I think based on questioning I heard Mr. Elliott say, listening to your response, if I understand it, that basically all fossil fuels, coal, gas, oil, are up not just because of the political and environmental climate, but the litigation relative to pipeline and other infrastructure construction. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We have constraints on the infrastructure today. If you look at the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and the Mountain Valley Pipeline, those two projects combined would have brought 5 BCF of gas into Transco Zone 5, as Mr. Elliott mentioned, which is a constrained zone for supply. That is the low-cost Marcellus shale gas, which would have reduced the cost of commodity prices.
And what I'm trying to understand then, because you said unprecedented, at least in your time, and what I'm really trying to understand is, do we know why? Is it because of supply and demand? Is it, why the litigation? Where's, if I can ask this, where's that coming from? And what's happening and why? Do you know?
Yes, sir. The litigation is primarily from environmental groups that are questioning the impact of the new pipeline infrastructure, and they're also questioning the need for such pipeline infrastructure. So when you look at these pipeline companies that have historically provided additional capacity to companies like ours that need it to serve firm customers, they no longer have certainty associated with a timeline from which they can start earning money on the costs that they have incurred. And the costs have doubled, nearly doubled on Mountain Valley Pipeline. The cost went up dramatically on Atlantic Coast Pipeline, which is the reason it was canceled. And also it was canceled because there was so much uncertainty due to ongoing litigation as to when the pipeline could go into service. So I don't know of any for-profit business that can survive an environment where they have no idea when they can start earning a return on their investment.
Okay. I don't know how much deeper I want to dig on that. I'm probably just going to let that sit there or stew for a little bit. What I did want to ask, just for my edification, I think Attorney Elliott touched on this too, page 7, line 13 through 18 of your direct, where you explain these AMA and its effect on the set capacity cost. I thought I understood it, but the more I read it, it's like, I'm not really sure I did. Briefly, can you tell me, how does that work?
Yes, sir. DESC is the capacity holder, so we have the contract for the pipeline capacity. But as you're aware, we serve customers right here in South Carolina. But under the FERC rules, which is FERC Order 712, the FERC allows utilities like DESC to partner with an asset manager who serves markets all along, let's take Transco for instance, all along the Transco system. So it's not just customers they serve in South Carolina, but they can serve customers all up to New York City. And what they're able to do is they take pieces of capacity that they act as agent for, and they're able to deliver to several different markets along the path of capacity that we hold. In exchange for that, we're given a payment so that they can use that capacity to not just serve us, but to serve others. So it reduces our cost of the capacity.
Which reduces the cost to the customer, correct?
Yes, sir, exactly.
Good answer. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Mr. Sheehan, if I might ask a question or two. Page 10 of 22, line 2 through 5, you say spot coal availability is also exacerbated by increased export of domestic coal into the international market. And I've heard that from you and maybe someone else. I can't recall. Do we know where it's going? I mean, the international market, that's kind of big. Is it going all over the world or one particular place, two particular places?
I think what we're seeing, Mr. Commissioner, is a reorganization of energy internationally. When you look at what the natural gas prices were abroad, actually for beginning March, April, May of last year, you really started to see a ramp up as far as what it might cost Europe, for instance, in order to get their gas. So whenever you see that, the calculation that they use is similar to what we use. It's least cost and most economical. Well, they just basically take a back calculation of, okay, well, here's my other source of energy. Here's my lineup. How much is it going to cost to get coal here versus what I'm going to have to pay to get LNG from Russia, for instance, or Saudi Arabia, or any of these, Qatar, any of these other places. And if it's cheaper to come to the Americas to buy coal, then that's what they do. They'll get with the trader. The trader will go out and purchase the coal in the domestic market, and it'll start heading to the ports for export. And that's along with metallurgical coal, thermal coal. Usually thermal coal is not as valuable as metallurgical coal. Right now, metallurgical coal's $400 a ton, which goes into the making of steel internationally. So And over the years, steel, metallurgical coal has been certainly the most in demand type of coal that there is. Thermal coal, given the prices of the past 2-3 years of natural gas, thermal coal has really been reduced. So when you saw those run up in prices, you know, that's why, okay, we need this coal, we need this thermal coal, and the capacity to produce that has been severely degraded over the past few years. And then you start to see those run up in prices.
Okay, so what I think I'm hearing then is it's mostly just simply a market-driven
Yeah, supply
thing.
supply and demand.
They pay more, that's where they're gonna send it.
Yes, sir.
Is it primarily being used for generation, or do we know?
Well, I mean, I can't say, I would think so, Mr. Commissioner, that in industrials, you know, industrials still use coal as well. So, I mean, I would say, but for the most part, I know of, or have read, I should say, multiple countries who have decided to retire their coal plants, no longer are going to retire their coal plants.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Shin and Mr. Brookmeyer. Not that I'm ignoring you, I just don't have any questions. Thank you. Thank you all.
Mr. Chair?
Commissioner Urban, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, panel. It's good to have you with us today and very informative in your testimony. Ms. Jackson, I'd like to ask you a couple of follow-up questions, if we may. One of the things that impressed me most was volatility and uncertainty of the current market for both natural gas and coal and oil, all three. And you outlined a number of reasons. One was the political volatility worldwide, as we see Western Europe having to go to LP gas since they are not going to no longer buy Russian natural gas from the pipeline that was built. I guess all those things add a great deal of uncertainty going forward, don't they? Because just yesterday, I believe the military leaders testified before Congress that they anticipate this war in Ukraine could go on for years. And of course, it could expand into politics and other areas. Didn't that concern you?
Yes, sir, it does. Because as we've seen over the last decade, fuel prices are we are competing on a global market. It's not just domestically that we're concerned, but we do have a substantial supply of domestic coal and natural gas, and oil for that matter. We just need the infrastructure to be able to get it to the markets that need it.
I agree with you. That's certainly a piece of the puzzle that we're going to have to address at some point, which is why I encouraged the environmentalists to try to settle with Duke and Dominion on the Appalachian pipeline, because, you know, I think it could have been a win-win situation for both sides. It turned out really it's going to hurt both sides, I think, in the long term because of these supply constraints that we're talking about.
Yes, sir.
You know, when I first came on the commission almost 4 years ago, I think then back in 2016, 2017, you had a financial hedging program, true?
We had a financial hedging program for the local distribution company, the gas side of the house, if you will, the gas distribution. We have not had a financial hedging program for generation.
Okay. Would it be reasonable and prudent to reconsider the possibility of a limited hedging program where you could go into the marketplace, and if your analysts are telling you we're going to have $6 per decatherm natural gas in the foreseeable future, you could buy contracts to buy it at that price. And, if the price goes up, you could exercise the contracts and save the customers money in that regard, could you not?
There are costs associated with those contracts. So, and I just want to remind the commission that a financial hedging program does not enable the company to beat the current market prices. It's designed to reduce volatility overall. And one of the reasons that our gas distribution company hedging program was suspended was the cost associated with maintaining that program.
Well, your costs in every aspect of the business. I'm just wondering, you know, aren't other investor-owned utilities around the country utilizing financial hedges, purchasing their natural gas and oil, coal?
I have read that some utilities are using financial hedging programs and some are not. It just depends on what type of cost we're comfortable with as a, you know, in order to reduce volatility to our customers. We try to do that by the economic dispatch of our units, and we compare the cost of natural gas, coal, oil, purchase power. If we enter into a financial hedging program, we will be locked in per se for natural gas because you have to perfect those hedges. So that would eliminate the opportunity to consider other fuel sources to generate electricity. So those are the considerations you also have to take into effect. For the LDC doesn't have a choice, but generation does.
In terms of the power mix, isn't it true that many investor-owned utilities around the country have made a financial decision that it no longer is going to be economically feasible in the coming years to operate coal-fired units? Isn't that true?
Yes, sir, I do believe that's true. And also when you look at the decarbonization goals that we have as a company and as a nation, it's going to be difficult to continue to operate those coal-fired plants. However, I would say that natural gas would be a key component in that to support renewables, but also to provide reliable service to our customers.
Well, let's take that one step further because I think you're right. But would you agree with me that as the potential savings, you know, between what's cheaper, coal, natural gas, or oil, if all three trend upward in price at the same time, your options are limited? Would you agree with that?
I would say that we still have the opportunity to burn a fuel to generate electricity. And until battery technology advances, the question is, what's going to be baseload generation? Because
okay. Well, I'd like to explore that just for a minute. One way to reduce peak loads would be to expand efforts at energy efficiency programs. Would you agree with that?
Yes, sir. That's on an average use basis. Yes, sir.
And so wouldn't it be reasonable and prudent to make further efforts toward expanding energy efficiency throughout the service area to reduce peak demands both in the winter and summer, particularly in the winter, reducing winter peaks, but also summer peaks?
Well, I will say, Commissioner Irvin, that my historical experience in the wintertime has been that we see a decline in average use per customer associated with the efficiency of appliances. However, when we get to these peak days or design days, if you will, we do not see a reduction in those associated with the efficiency of appliances because typically they're running full out for 3 to 5 days. So they're at their maximum levels of operation. So you don't get the same efficiency levels that you would gain during, you know, a normal temperature scenario.
Okay, well, that brings me to another point, and I'd like for you to address. And that the other point is that if you use renewables, and for example, I know Dominion is doing this off the coast of Virginia with their new wind turbine plant. When is that going to come online?
I'm not certain of the exact in-service date. Mr. Brookmeyer, would you know that? I know that they are testing this year.
Right,
Right.
they're doing the
It seems-
testing, but I don't know the exact date for the actual production.
Seems like I read somewhere that they hope to have it online in about 4 years, but could be less depending on how things go. But will South Carolina be a beneficiary of that renewable energy resource?
Not to my knowledge at this time.
In other words, the power generated there just be used in Virginia alone? Is that what you're saying?
That's my understanding as of right now. But as you've indicated, you know, we're in the early phases of development.
Right. And when do you think battery storage is going to be economically feasible as a way to extend solar usage when the sun's not shining?
Commissioner Irvin, if I knew that, I would already be retired. On my island.
Wondering, but you all are the experts, and so I thought you might have an idea.
Sorry.
Well, let me ask you this: is it reasonable to presume that the technology is getting better, the length of storage is getting longer? So, could you say in 5 years or so we'll see some breakthroughs in battery storage?
I have learned with what I've seen in the last decade in the natural gas industry with the ability to produce gas from material that I never thought would be economically feasible using, and you know, in these shale gas regions. I never say never anymore. I do think 5 years may be aggressive, but I do think this country will figure it out. We're very creative. You know, our ingenuity has proven itself over time. So I do think we will see that. When that occurs, I don't know. And that's why I think natural gas is going to play a key role in supporting those developments.
Well, I think you're right if the price didn't go sky high due to unforeseen circumstances. And of course, we had some of those circumstances recently. And so I'm going to encourage Dominion to continue to weigh all options because we need a diversified portfolio. You would agree with that?
Yes, sir. I think that is the key to anybody's portfolio, whether it be your personal financial portfolio or our company's. Diversity is the key.
And having agreement on that point, the old adage is you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your testimony today. No further questions.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. And thanks to the panel. You're holding up well. So I have a question that kind of follows from one of Mr. Elliott's questions for you, Ms. Jackson. You all were talking about the pipelines and Zone 5 and the constraints on getting gas to Zone 5, which is pretty much where we are.
Yes, sir.
And a lot of that comes from, as you said, the cancellation of the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and the Mountain Valley Pipeline not being completed. So those are, if I understand it correctly, one of the big drivers for the increases in natural gas prices in this proceeding. And so those increased prices are a part of what's being flowed through to customers if this is approved. And it's as a result of the constraints on the pipeline supply. Is that correct?
It's based on the price we had to pay due to those supply constraints because we're so limited in Transco Zone 5's area as far as flowing supply. It is not liquid. And so that is our concern going forward. And there's a lot of power generation need in that zone.
Okay. All right. So I think then that basically you're saying that we would benefit if we had better supply lines into the Zone 5 South Carolina area.
Yes, sir. I'm just concerned with, it becomes an economic issue. What type of company is going to take the risk if there is potential litigation with an uncertain timeline to develop projects to bring new supply to markets that need it? That really is the key issue, is it's not a change at the federal level. It's not a change at the local or state level. It's the issue with litigation and the uncertainty with that. There's no guaranteed timeline. So I can't sit here today and say that if Mountain Valley Pipeline goes back and asks for another appeal, how long that's going to take to be resolved.
So I think what I understand is that all that litigation is costing South Carolina customers.
Yes, sir. In the big scheme of things, because what Mountain Valley Pipeline will do is it will lower regional prices.
Okay. So on a slightly different topic, we're approaching, I think, the storage injection time frame for natural gas. And so how does the inventory that you have access to compare with normal years?
Well, just to clarify, the generation side of the house does not have storage facilities or doesn't contract for storage facilities, but the local distribution side of the house or gas distribution, we're in a pretty good shape going forward, and I think the country's in pretty good shape right now. As we talked about going into the winter season in that December or January timeframe, we were below the 5-year average, but we've caught up somewhat. So we're at the 5-year average, so I'm hoping that that will help reduce prices over the summer months. But it's all based on what happens globally, but also what happens as far as the weather goes. If we see a hot summer, that's not going to help storage levels.
Okay, thank you. So switching gears here for a minute, Mr. Brookmeyer.
Yes, sir.
So my understanding is that approximately 40% of the worldwide enriched uranium comes from Russia. Is that a number that sounds familiar?
Now, the world enrichment that's probably a good approximation, 30 to 40%.
So it sounds to me like the situation that's going on in Russia, Ukraine, whatever, has the potential to be impacting not just the natural gas or the oil or the coal, but potentially impacting the supplies of enriched uranium worldwide. Do you think there's any truth to that?
Absolutely, that's true. And also just to add to that, the level of import to the U.S. is limited by the Russian suspension agreement, which is going to limit the amount of import of the United States requirements to about 15% coming up at the 2028 timeframe. It's roughly 20 to 24% right now. But that's going to start to decrease over time. But yeah, on a global basis, because enrichment is a global supply consideration, that is going to affect certainly the capacities that we currently have. And right now those discussions are being held on increasing capacity from Western supply.
Okay. So I think what I heard you say is that based on the current sanctions, we're already seeing limitations in supply of enriched
Well, right now, just to be clear on that, there's no sanctions of enriched uranium.
Okay, so that's outside the sanctions at this time?
At this time, yes.
Okay.
But that's, again, that can change very quickly.
All right. So another, just a little question here. The NRC standards do not allow for enrichment above 5%, is my understanding.
That's currently true right now, yes.
Okay. And so if it were enriched to a higher degree, would that create a dangerous situation to use the uranium, or?
No. Of course, you know, to what extent enrichment are we talking about? But, you know, we're right now as an industry discussing what we call LEU plus or low enriched uranium plus, greater than 5%, having those discussions with our regulator to see what, for economic benefits, if there are any, because that's also mean it's more cost. So you have to somehow get the benefit of that further enrichment. But those discussions are being held currently and looking for ways to increase enrichment. But then, of course, you want to also, if you're putting more gas in the tank, you have to be able to burn it too. And so you have to increase, to a large extent, the ability to extract all that extra enrichment in there. So we're looking at, is it potentially 2-year cycles versus an 18-month cycle? So that's where the benefit really comes in. Right now, with an 18-month cycle that we currently operate on, we don't really need the increased enrichment.
And on page 5, you indicate that the company has a uranium inventory and to help provide security.
Right.
And maybe that's not something that you feel comfortable talking about, and that's fine if you don't. But if you talk about how much uranium you have stored, then that might put you at a disadvantage when you're trying to buy. I don't know, but I guess basically if you can say anything in terms of
I can say that, you know, just in the more general sense that for DESC is well positioned for many years in terms of its enriched uranium supply and its uranium inventory. And it's largely as a result of the canceled units 2 and 3. Those initial cores of enriched uranium were purchased. And so those are in inventory. So regardless of what happens in the global environment, it's not going to affect to any large degree or any significant degree whatsoever the fuel cost, nuclear fuel costs in South Carolina.
Okay. It's good to hear that there's a benefit coming out of that. Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Commissioners, any more questions for this panel? Any redirect?
At this time, no, the company does not have any redirect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, or lady and gentlemen.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. The company requests that the witnesses please be excused.
Okay, your request is granted. Ladies and gentlemen, we are in recess until 3 p.m. We have a 2 o'clock business meeting, and we should be back on the record in this matter at 3 p.m. Thank you.